Greetings and welcome to Collaborating for Success, High Impact Classroom Family Engagement. My name is Sheila Kane, and I'm the District Coordinator for Family and Community Engagement in the Office of Strategic Partnerships with Pinellas County Schools. My co-presenter is...
And I'm Dr. Valerie Brown, the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Pinellas County Schools. And welcome to Pinellas.
Today, this is what we hope to accomplish. 1, you will walk away knowing what family engagement is and why it's so important and critical to student success, how to build relationships with parents, and you will know how to focus on initiatives that are linked to learning and provide academic support at home. We will use something that's called the dual capacity framework for family school partnerships. We know that few of you, if any, have probably had any kind of family engagement in your practicum or in your education. So this will be your first exposure, and we hope to give you a great experience. It's important to know the history. We have formed a district family engagement team this past year. Most of the departments in Pinellas County Schools represented. We worked hard to come up with a vision and these core values. We highly recommend that you read and embrace these core values as your own. I'm going to go ahead and go over them now because it's important that you understand them as we move forward with this class. Our vision for Pinellas County Schools is that it is a place where rich partnerships among educators, families, and community members promote 100% student success. You can see how we've related it to the district vision. The core values: all cultures, ethnicities, family structures, languages, and religions are welcome in our schools to receive an equitable education for their children. Partnerships between families and schools are essential for student learning, growth, and success. Building relationships between district, school staff, and families are vital for student success. And collaboration with families and stakeholders promotes openness, two-way communication, and shared decision-making and transparency. What the research tells us: there is absolutely a positive and convincing relationship between family engagement and the benefits for students, including, and most importantly, academic achievement. This relationship holds across families of all economic, racial, and ethnic and educational backgrounds, and for students of all ages. We here in the Office of Strategic Partnerships use research and relationships we've built with experts in the industry. Dr. Karen Mapp from Harvard School of Education, Scholastic Education, the National Association for Family and School Engagement, and the Flamboyant Foundation. We'll actually be watching some videos from the Flamboyant Foundation today. We say it's all about relationships. It begins with relationships and the foundation for engaging your families. Think about other parts of your life and your relationships, your friendships, maybe your marriage. You know how it's give and take? It's give and take every day, and it takes tending constantly. This is the same with relationships that you build with your families. We're going to cover steps to building relationships, beginning with fellowshipping, positive communication, and really learning about each other. This video will show you an example of a great relationship one school built in Washington, D.C. with this parent.
Well, immediately after the home visit, I was then invited to a back to school night they were having in Stanton. They gave me the little flyer. I was like, well, you know, we're having a back to school night. It's from this time and this time. Bring the kids, you know, like a meet and greet the teachers and everyone that was going to be there. But one thing I can say about, Staten period is that it is constant communication, something I never had, something I completely enjoy. And it's not just negative communication, it's constant positive communication. I can be here at home, at work, anywhere, and one of my teachers would send me a text. Or I used to love it, Miss Lucas would send pictures. Take pictures of them doing classwork, and you'll see, look how my Tanae, well, I call her Bird. The school calls her Bird, which I love because it's like a community. They adopted her nickname. So she would send me a text like, look at Bird. She's having a wonderful day today, and she's doing good. But in saying that, that allowed me to hear. I put a trust in Miss Lucas for doing that. So no matter what she said, how she had to say it, what the information is, it made it easier for me to receive it from her, because she had built this communication, this trust that I never had. So I tell people now, friendship. You know what I'm saying? We're not friends to talk every single day, but she's a person that I will always hold in a high regard. She will always have my respect. I really respect Miss Lucas, and I value her so much, because not just her, but all the teachers, but like she was the first one to really extend herself to me. And I would get the text, and then one day Tanae had a bad day, and she called me, and I was expecting to hear something good. Oh, she got good on her test, or she did read, and she was like, well, we had a bit of an issue today. I'm like, for real? What happened? Well, Tanae did X, Y, and Z. And I didn't get defensive. I didn't get, well, what did you do? Or what did I actually sat back and I listened, and I received the information, and I processed the information. For me, that was something different, because at that point in time, I felt it like, why am I getting mad? Because normally when you call me on the phone and you telling me something about my child did this, I'm naturally on the defense, like, well, what did you do to make my child do this? Or who was messing with her in class, because my baby's a good baby. But in this time, it was different. And I don't know, it's because of the positive, feedback she gives me every day, the friendship we brought. It just made, when she was telling me what was going on, I took a breath, I stopped, and I listened. And then I was like, we actually got to a page where we worked together. I said, well, you know what, since she's having a bad day, can you put her on the phone? And I spoke with her on the phone, and I let her know that me and Miss Lucas are working together. We are a team, and if she asks you to do something, you need to treat it as if mommy is asking you to do something. So if she asks you to sit down, you need to sit down. And there was no more problems with Tanae.
Every time I watch this video, I love it. It's so powerful to me, the relationship that was built between that mom and that classroom teacher. Don't you all want your parents to say, I have a respect for their child's teacher, that they'll be someone that they always hold in high regard? I wonder what your reactions are when you watch that, and if you're aware in any way of that kind of approach. Maybe you saw it again in your practicum, or it was discussed in one of your education classes. I'm not sure, but it's powerful. It's powerful to see how building that kind of relationship can result in that kind of a partnership. That was a clear, true, authentic partnership. And that mom saying, I didn't get defensive. I asked, the teacher to put my daughter on the phone, and she explained, we're a team, we're together. There isn't anything more I can say. It's just an amazing example of what can be done with building relationships in your classroom. This last year, we learned a lot about building those relationships virtually. And I think in some ways we need to continue to think about using those different formats and what we've learned, and building on face-to-face communication, but using technology, using what your school, what your administration gives you access to. Some schools use Class Dojo, some use other formats of communication, but those virtual means can be another way to build that relationship along with your obviously are face-to-face. Now, this slide talks about schools and the roles for family and school partnerships. And of course, they're equal, but the responsibility to build the relationship or build the partnership rests with the school. And that can be a little confusing when you first think about it. But I think the important piece is that schools are perceived to have the power. Sometimes parents feel intimidated by school staff, or maybe they've had a bad experience and hold that and worry about how that's going to play out with their child. But the responsibility for the overture here, that's what we're saying, the overture to build the relationship rests with the teachers, especially even the administration. And that heavy lift that the teacher takes on, to reach out is what then becomes, it grows and it's shared over time. I think that we need to acknowledge that reaching out to parents, school staff, and administration reaching out is easier for educators than reaching in is for our parents. So that's really what this slide is talking about, and acknowledging that you need to make that overture. I mentioned before the dual capacity framework for family school partnerships. And this is what the framework looks like. I'm sure you're not going to be able to see every word here. I'm going to go over what is most important at this time. And then as you complete the course, you will be sent this dual capacity framework in a format that you can actually see and use. So we're going to focus on the process conditions. The framework overall talks about the challenges, educators and families, and as we've mentioned, where they've come from and what kind of experiences they may have had in other school settings. And that's the challenge. The challenge is to build that partnership, and then learning about the essential conditions and program and policy goals, moving to capacity outcomes, which is, of course, effective partnerships that support student and school improvement. But as I mentioned, we're going to focus on process conditions. That's the second column in the purple. Process conditions are really what we acknowledge is necessary for adult learners. So we've talked about relationships, the relational process condition, building on mutual trust. You need intentional activities and actions as you reach out to families that build on that mutual trust. Secondly, we've mentioned the term link to learning. Link to learning is, again, intentional activities and actions that help families learn what their child is supposed to know and be able to do in a content area. Tying the activities or the actions to grade level standards, never missing an opportunity to give parents a tip or a tool or a strategy to use at home. The third process condition is asset-based, and that's focusing on building family capacity while honoring their knowledge and strengths. We need to stop thinking we need to fix parents and think we need to just empower them. We need to give them the tools. They're ready and waiting. Of course, we need to do this in a culturally responsive way. This is the fourth process condition. Being certain that you're sensitive to different cultures and back to our core values, that you approach the activities with equity in mind. The fifth condition is collaborative. This is giving families an opportunity to build positive relationships with each other. It's simple. When you bring families in, instead of always being the one to teach, let them have time to build relationships with each other, to ask each other, what works for you at home? What are you doing to help your student in that content area? And the last process condition is interactive. This is making time for families to have a chance to practice what they have learned and receive feedback. That way, they'll be confident when they go home with their student to use that tip or tool or strategy you've taught them. They've got an opportunity to practice and you've given them feedback, and that's where success will arrive. The next set of slides, Dr. Brim will be presenting, and as we've talked about with the process conditions and being relational, we'll move into communication as an important aspect of that process condition. Dr. Brim?
Well, thank you. Communication with families is one of the most critical strategies that is needed for overall success of your students. And I just want to stress how critical it is during these fluid times. So it's important, as Ms. Kane has mentioned, how you take the dual capacity framework, those 5 condition processes, and embed all of your communication with your families. It is important, number 1, to discuss and get input on how and when you communicate with your parents and families. This is going to take some front load efforts. 1, I always advise, do not bill anything for families without families. We in education always take the advantage of our knowledge and say, this is what is needed. This is how it is needed. And we bill only to create a continual disconnect from our processes and procedures to the families. So it is important to have that dialogue with your families. What is the best method that you feel we could stay connected? Is it email? Is it some use of social media? Is it texting? How do you want to communicate? If it's picking up the phone, and it's going to be so important because as we look at the generational gap, each generation has a different method of what we consider effective communication. And so again, I just think it's so important that you have that dialogue with your families to find out how they want to be communicated to. Establish yourself as someone parents can trust. And I just wanted you to go back and think about, as Ms. Kane mentioned, that relationship process. Relationship entails fellowship. You build trust when you fellowship with someone ongoing. Once a parent believes that you have an invested interest in their student or scholar, that is an automatic gateway for you all to begin to build that trusting relationship. If that child comes home raving about their teacher, guess what? That is another open gate for you to begin to build those trusting relationships. Some of the key pieces of building trusting relationship is transparency. We don't know it all as educators, and we are not in a situation where we cannot depend upon our parents to add those components that we need to fully educate their child. That transparency, that ongoing communication, that trust factor will continue to grow. Always tell parents that you value and encourage their questions and concerns. Oftentimes, to our shame, we have oftentimes been dismissive of parents' information, their input, or valuing who our parents are. Our parents come from varying degrees of diversity, background knowledge, education knowledge. But guess what? The most valuable information they bring to us is how their child thinks, how their child responds, how their child is educated. You take that information and you engraft that into your instructional strategies. Ask those questions. Tell me, how do you address Johnny's behavior at home? And let them respond to you. And they will be just as transparent to say, I do not have any effective strategies. Can we brainstorm those things together? Or can we link together to tag team? One of the most powerful things that was in the video was, guess what? They made sure that child understood that they are partners, that the parent was just as valued as the teacher. The expectation was the same for both partners. And I think that is so important as we create this communication component. And lastly, number 4, assure parents you will inform them immediately about any concerns you might have with regard to their child or their children. This is important, and it's all in the method and delivery. If you always connect the concern to the impact of learning, it's digestible. No parent wants to continuously hear that there are problems with their kid on a daily basis. But to be able to draft statements such as, today, during our math class, Richard missed key components of multiplication because he was off task with another student. It's important that he stays focused because, as you know, math is an cumulative subject that if he misses out on one component, it can impact another. So it's all in the delivery. It's all in how you present. And again, it's all about building those trust factors and those relationships. Now, the next slide, parent-teacher exchanges. You notice that conferences was crossed out. Why was conferences crossed out? Because if you focus on exchanges, exchanges are connected to relationships. Exchanges are connected to conversations. Conferences is you listen while I talk. And some of those types of conferences don't go over very well. Start by asking families, what would you like to know? What is it that you notice in your child's education that is a gap that you would like to share with me? Say something again positive about their child. Parents always want to hear how positive things about their child. You know what I noticed? That Sarah loves science. She gets excited about science. It might be a great activity if we get extra science kits that we will give to her to have at home. Provide them with information that they would like to know. One of the key strategies, particularly in our elementary levels, is all about reading. We start in kindergarten about alphabet sound. We talk about different things where we feel parents should automatically know. But you think about parents that you communicate with, what you don't want to happen. If you're asking parents to support their child with alphabet sounds, you are assuming they know the alphabet sounds. Or if you're asking them to support you in a math problem of addition, and you are a baby boomer like myself, I'm going to go back to the old way of teaching them addition, which is going to be problematic if you have a total different way of getting out of the answer for addition. So you have to talk about those questions. Provide them with additional information that they need to know: successes, weaknesses, social interaction, behavior, and support needed. If you know a kid loves to talk, give them leadership skills, give them leadership opportunities, have them interact, have them support you. If you know a kid has a weakness, one of the things you do not do is display that weakness openly among that child's peers. But you can couch that weakness in something to build not only to strengthen the weakness, but the kid will not even know you're working on that area. And you need to know, if a kid has an IEP, what are the supports for that IEP? Nothing is more embarrassing when a parent asks an educator, "Did you read my child's IEP?" And the response is no. That's negligence on our part. We want to make sure we have all the information we need about our students. Ask for their input and jointly establish a plan for improvement, including in the classroom and at home. We talk about, as educators, what we call a transference of information. You know how you can determine if a teacher is awesome? Is how well they transfer knowledge to students. It's no different. You know how you engage and know you have a very valuable relationship with a parent? That what is taking place in your classroom is also representative of home. If you have resources in your classroom, it is important that that parent has resources at home. And set up follow-up time if necessary. That all goes back to your communication plan. In the beginning of the year, we're going to have 2 virtual meetings, one in our first semester, one in our second semester. If there is a decline in a particular area, I may ask to meet intermittently regarding those pieces until we bring that student back up to mastery. If those parents know that that is going to be expected and that is part of your way of work, guess what? Not only will they appreciate that, but they're going to look for other teachers to duplicate your way of work. Next slide. Parents say they feel honored when school staff treat them as true partners in their children's education development and invite them to work on decision-making committees and projects. That is so true. And it's more evident that we are trying to do a better job in reaching out to our families. And going back to our original slide, honor comes with respect, comes with value, comes with request of information. If you're discussing a tough issue, ask them, what do you think we should do? Not what you need to do. Or I'm sending the kid to the office because he's uncontrollable. Or there's an area that the kid just do not understand. If you think about over the past year, our students are returning with a deficit in learning, all students. The pandemic has left a gap in learning. So when you think about the varying degrees of your students and how they learn, you have to always remember, if you take the most brightest students and challenge those students that are low with high expectations, you're going to move the bright as well as those that are low performing students. But you can't do it without a true partnership, because you're going to have to constantly meet to make decisions. You could set up so many software tools where that dialogue takes place electronically. Nowadays, conversations like talking points can go directly to a parent phone, which lead me into the next slide of link to learning. When we think about all of our engagement activities, all of our dialogue, the number one thing that we want, that our students are successful academically and they are prepared for career and life. So no matter what engagement component or what activity is planned, it has to find its root back to learning. So plan school-wide or grade level or a classroom events with a link to learning. For example, if you all have a first grade team, and when you meet in your PLCs or when you meet with your SBL team or your engagement team at the school site, and you notice that in your first grade, there is truly a deficit on one of the strands for math. But you know there's an activity that is coming up that's called Halloween night. Take strategies that are needed and incorporate them with the fun event. That is so easy. So when you have 200 or 300 parents that show up, they don't leave empty-handed. As you do with instructions, use data to guide your family engagement. And that was an example I just used. Always look at your data. Do you have time for it? Oftentimes, it is moving so fast, you don't really have an opportunity to really fellowship with your own data. But it is important if you really plan to move students. Where are there opportunities to move students forward? What can you share with your families? What can you learn from them, and what can you teach them? Even if you develop a webinar that is giving them instructions on how to work out a math word problem and how do you dissect a word problem. Do you know you could do a simple video such as this, record it, and send the link to their parents for them to look at their leisure? You have just extended your classroom to the home. And guess what? They will build their own virtual library of teaching strategies from their teacher. Will the family learn? So we always, let me start back. We always ask key questions when a person say, oh, this is a link to learning event. We have 3 key questions. Will the family learn a new tool to support the child at home? Will that parent at that event or on that virtual meeting practice the tip? And lastly, will there be some ongoing dialogue about share something about your child with the teacher, or share, or please raise your hand and give us some examples of what you do for home for all, so that all can benefit. Until or less we can make a difference in the classroom with teachers, family engagement will not be systemic. What does that word systemic mean? It's almost like you go to Chick-fil-A and you're able to watch systems Chick-fil-A has put in place to be more customer friendly, their operations be more effective. And guess what? It's going to build productivity and an additional customer base. So when you think about a fine oil tube, that's what we mean by systemic. You want to put processes and procedures in place that it is like a machine. The families will say to the next year family, oh, let me just explain to you, Mrs. Jones. This is her communication process. She said that she might tweak it, but it's not going to alter because this is her system. That is what we mean by systemic education. So our next slide is that, or our next video is you're going to hear from other individuals about the importance of engaging families.
I engage families because if you just look at the sheer math of it, 84% of their day, their year is spent outside of the classroom. And so when you look at just that number alone, that 84% of their time they're outside the classroom, you need to be supporting them in that time in their life. So you can't just stop your instruction at the door. It needs to go outside the door of your classroom. It needs to go into their life and with their family. And so I engage them because that's really where the bulk of their time is spent, is with their family. So their family should be partners in their education. I need to give them the tools and the vocabulary to be those partners.
I've been a teacher in DC public schools for 4 years now, and I have never met a parent that has not been invested and engaged with their students' learning. It's just untrue. All parents want their student to be successful just as much, if not more, than the teacher does. That's why they bring their child or send their child to school every day, so they want to be making sure that their student is successful. I think that sometimes parent engagement looks different, or oftentimes it does look different for every family, so it's important as the teacher to not make assumptions about what engagement should look like, but make sure that just like you differentiate for your students, you differentiate for your parents, so that you can engage all of them in a way that will make their student as successful as possible.
Spending time to make sure that parents are involved is absolutely necessary. You put in the hard work in the initial stage and you flow smoothly for the rest of the year. It makes sense to build trust and then you build relationship. So the first thing you tend to do with your parent involvement is build trust, build confidence. When parents see that you are genuinely interested in their child's learning, they see that you take what they are saying to you seriously, and you make a concerted effort to communicate with them regularly and effectively, smooth sailing throughout the year. They put in the effort for the first quarter, the first 3 months from September to December. Very hard. And for the rest of the year, you have parents doing just about whatever you ask them to do, because they know that you are serious about what you want to accomplish and that you genuinely have their child's interest at heart.
Now, the way I look at it is if you spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year engaging families and helping them to support their children throughout the year, then you're really saving yourself time at the end of the year or at the end of advisories by not having to have those long and sometimes pretty stressful conversations with administration why students aren't doing better in your classes. So I personally look at it as a huge time saver.
One thing that you realize over the course of time is that while it seems daunting and overwhelming in the beginning, it is entirely going to pay off in the long run. Prior to the school year starting, I make an effort. Certainly you don't know until about 2 weeks in exactly who your students are going to be after the enrollment is finalized. But as many as I can before the school year even starts, I reach out to each parent through phone calls, through parent letters, and I try and contact each person before I've even met the student to introduce myself and talk to them, just relate to them that I'm excited to meet their student, because especially working with 9th graders, I'm excited to meet their student, and any kind of things that they particularly want me to know going into the year. You know, it takes a little bit of time, but the parents already know me when we've entered the school year. There's saving me time in the long run of I am able to maximize the learning day beyond the parameters of our school class schedule. If I am able to communicate with parents about what materials the students are covering, things that they can be doing at home to support their learning, that learning is continued beyond the classroom. And I'm going to see more significant results if the student has more learning time. But it also saves me time in what I'm able to do in the classroom because they've been doing stuff at home.
Engaging my students' families has helped me to, one, become more accountable. I find that if I'm opening up my data tracker, the actual tracker that I use, and sharing that with parents, then it's my job and to keep that updated. And if it's not, then since I'm so transparent with it, then people will know. So if you open up to the parents, then you find yourself being held accountable by the parents. Also, for instance, when I learn about a student's life, I learn about what they love, their interests, I learn about what their parents hold near and dear to their heart. I'm able to engage the student more by providing instruction that is tailored to what they love and what they want to become, and also what the parents want to see. My students, my first year teaching, all grew almost 1.5 years, 1.45 years in reading, which was awesome. I was very proud of, especially as a first year teacher. And I owe a lot of that to the family engagement and really engaging the families to make sure that kids were reading at home and letting parents know what strategies to give their kids to become better readers. My students, my first year teaching, all grew almost 1.5 years, 1.45 years.
That is a very exciting testimonial video for me. And when you listen to all of the testimonies about engaging families, there are so many common themes across the board. Earlier, we mentioned about doing the work in the front end so that throughout the year is more productive. The teacher from Duke Ellington High School and Ms. Horn from the high school, even if you think about high school students and parents saying, I'm engaged because I was contacted by the teacher early on in the year and the expectations were laid out and the information that is needed and how the engagement of parents will look throughout the year. The other thing that was very important was accountability. When the teacher talked about accountability and using his daily tracker for transparency, those are the things that we go back to and we say, we build those trusting relationships. We build those truth relationships, or as Ms. Kane often would say, authentic engagement to maximize the learner continuously. So we want this engagement. It, yes, is going to take time, but is worth it. And our final slide, I want to be able to talk about the Office of Strategic Partnerships and additional what I call resources that we provide that you can take advantage of at any given point. We know that it is very important, particularly returning from a pandemic and still a very fluid, ongoing situation where we want to make sure our students stay engaged. And if we keep them engaged, your job as a teacher will be a lot better in actually delivering instructions to engage students. We have mentoring programs where we do both face-to-face, if it permits, and virtually. We have lunch pals for elementary students, that it is important, particularly with a lot of our students experiencing mental health issues, that we pair up that student with a caring adult. We have girlfriends, that is from elementary to high school, where girlfriends could be either individually or small group, similar to 5,000 role model, which is the male component. Those groups keep kids engaged because they keep these kids connected to experiences outside the classroom as well as inside. Take Stock in Children is a program, a scholarship program that is sponsored by the Pinellas Ed Foundation for grades 6th grade through 12th. But more importantly, part of that criteria is the students must be connected to a mentor. And again, to have kids have an opportunity to have their tuition paid for is a great opportunity to stay engaged. We encourage classroom assistance, whether virtually or actually face-to-face. Booster clubs, tutorers. We have a parent advocacy program where we have a parent advocate that will really support the families or the parents, although they are school board employees. They help those parents that need those extra supports and resources. They hold accountable our school district to make sure they're doing appropriately by what is required to make sure that kid is successful. We have 21st century after school programs in in 12 school sites, and it's only for elementary. But yet again, this program will provide tutoring, homework assistance. It also provides students with what we call the theory of learning and the application of learning, with so many STEM activities, field trip activities, own hand activities, collaboration. And so all of these pieces are very, very important. So our Office of Strategic Partnership, more recently, we've added a bilingual translator that will support our non-English speaking students so that there is no disconnect. Our family engagement is district-wide. Mrs. Kane is responsible for family engagement. So all of our webinars, all of our trainings, instructional staff training, such as this. And then we also have a 3-hour version where we actually help educators build their plan. We have the family engagement team that we support and train that will be at every school site. We have the recognition programs such as Car Wash, the Maria Edmonds Hispanic celebration, the Burrow Davis celebration. All of those components are comprised in this office because we want to stay connected to schools. We want to stay connected to families, but moreover, we want to give our students experiences that will be lifelong experiences. So with that being said, I'm going to ask the question about making sure our objectives have been met, but more so, what is family engagement is clear, why family engagement is critical to students, how to begin and build relationship with parents, and how to focus on initiatives that are linked to learning and academically focused. We want to thank you for attending our session. Our contact information, Mrs. Kane, as you can see it, is 588-6000, extension 1846. Our direct office to get a hold of all of our coordinators is 588-6405. And I want to go back and talk about briefly our volunteer program and our new coordinator and our background screening. So we are here to help. We're providing trainings, connect with your community liaison at your school. And we thank you and we wish you your best as you move forward in your education endeavors.
Thank you, Dr. Brim. Thank you for attending, collaborating for success. Have a great school year.